Disclaimer.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily the views of Tash, Becky, or Be Your Best You podcast.
Hey there, lovely people. Welcome to Be Your Best You with Tash and Becky, your go-to hangout for all things spiritual, subconscious, and downright magical. We're here to sprinkle a little mystical wisdom into your everyday life and help you level up your reality.
Picture this as your cosmic coffee date, where we chat about the unseen world, blend in some psychology vibes, and stir up the subconscious magic. Get ready to be the queen of your own reality, live a life that lights you up, and have a blast doing it.
So grab your latte or your tea and let's dive into another episode of Be Your Best You, where the mystical meets the mundane and your best life awaits.
Cheers to creating magic together.
Let's do this.
Hi, lovely people.
Hi.
We just wanted to pop on before we get started on our episode to ask you if you would mind, if you haven't done so already, please could you rate and review our podcast? If you're not already, could you make sure that you're following us on Spotify, Apple, or any podcast player that you listen to us on, so you can make sure that you get notified every week when a new episode comes out. You never know when you might need to hear it. It could be perfect timing. And also, don't forget, you can watch us on YouTube as well. And if you watch us over there, don't forget to subscribe. Again, you'll get notified with all the new and latest episodes.
And also, don't forget to share with all your friends.
Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate all your support. We appreciate you listening to us every week. Thank you so much.
You.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Be Your Best You with Tash.
And Becky, the guest edition.
And today we have on the show the just lovely Brandy Anderson. This one is super cool.
Yes.
Brandy shares her story of how her grandmother connected with her through the veil. Now, we all know that there's stories of how, spirits flicker lights and turn the TV on. And, I've spoken about how I've experienced that myself. This is a whole nother level. And I don't want to give away how and why and what. Listen to the episode. But honestly, I think we could safely say, if you're not convinced that there's an afterlife after listening to Brandy, then I don't know what to do with you. But that also leads on to a really powerful, comforting conversation. It served as a very needed reminder for us of what the afterlife and understanding that there is an afterlife can do to help you now in how you live in your current life right now and make the most of it. So we hope you enjoy. And today we have on the show Brandy. Brandy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brandy.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to get talking with you, Brandy. So could you just tell everybody, before we dig into your story, could you tell everyone what it is that you do now and what you do in the world, kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a spiritual director and a Jungian coach. That's kind of what I do. And I'm also the author of Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife. And I am the co-host of a couple of podcasts where we talk about all kinds of metaphysical topics, everything from paranormal encounters to the more just spiritual aspects of life. So yeah, that's who I am and kind of what I do.
Amazing. Okay, so there's loads of stuff that we can dig into there, I'm sure. But one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk about was the premise of your book, really. Yeah. So could you tell us, this is what you do now, but I think your past was kind of very different. It's kind of very different. So would you let us know kind of how you got to where you are now and tell us kind of how you got to be here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had a spiritual awakening in 2014 that kind of sent me on a journey of just seeking out ultimate truth. And I plugged into some churches over the years because I was coming from a Christian context. My family is a Christian family. I wasn't really practicing any form of religion. So, at the time that I had my awakening, but coming from that context, that was just what I knew to do. I plugged into some churches and just tried to find something that I could hang my experience on, something to make sense of what had happened to me in my awakening encounter. And, I don't know. I came to the end of all of that, just sort of disenchanted. I found mainstream Christian answers to life's most important questions less than satisfying. And so that caused me to sort of dig deeper, go further. So I sort of transcended the church in a sense and landed in a more contemplative space. Still a Christ follower, but more mystical in the way that I would articulate it. And in that space, while I really felt like I had some ground underneath my feet in that space, like I had finally gotten to a place where I had a sense of peace. I could rest in the mystery. I was no longer really digging for answers. I felt that I could just rest. And then my grandmother came to the end of her physical life, and after she crossed, she found a way to push her way back into time and space and a way to have sustained communication with us. And again, the rug was pulled right out from under my feet. Everything I thought I knew about reality just kind of shifted in that moment. So my sustained communication with my grandmother through the veil has really served to connect a lot of theological and philosophical dots for me, bring things into sharper focus, I would say. And so in the book, that's kind of what I share. I share about that experience briefly, but primarily the book is about what happens when we die and how that should impact the way that we live life now. Matters, existential matters such as heaven and hell and, the things that people are really wrestling with. But I'm filtering everything through a Christian lens because that is the context that I was coming from. And so it's definitely, there are a lot of scriptures, verses that I sort of break down and, disassemble and re-explain. And so that's kind of, how I landed where I am currently. And in the course of all of that, after my awakening, before my grandmother even crossed, I sort of got really into Jungian psychology. I found it just really helpful because of the psycho-spiritual approach to life. And so in my own personal journey of becoming, it was so helpful. I went to school and began to study to become a spiritual director through a Jungian based program. And yeah, so it just all just integrated seamlessly with everything that I have learned about the afterlife from my grandmother through the veil. Yeah, the dots were connected beautifully, really.
Wow.
My goodness.
So I mean, so many questions there. But I suppose maybe, Lynn, can we just take it back a little bit? So you said you had your spiritual awakening in 2014. So I'm assuming at that point you kind of were open to the fact that there was an afterlife or there was something after this life or not.
Well, I suppose I really hadn't given it a lot of thought. And so at that time I was in a season of depression. That's kind of what brought on that awakening. And I know now that it wasn't clinical depression, it was existential depression. And so I wasn't really wrestling with those things in a conscious way, but of course, in an unconscious way, they were still below the surface, sort of driving my journey. And so things just became so heavy. I remember one morning I just cried out to God, and it wasn't a pious prayer by any stretch of the imagination. It was more of a if you are there kind of prayer where I just unleashed all of my frustrations. And it was in that ranting, really, in that really vulnerable place where I heard a voice as loud and clear as anything I've ever heard in my life. And it just said, "Be still." And instant peace washed over me and arrested me in that moment. And I remember thinking, this is God, but I don't have a context for what that means, what to do with this. And I had been raised in the church, in a Christian family, but, you know, through my teen years and all of my adult life, I had not been plugged into the church. So I didn't even realize that "be still" was a verse when I heard those words. So yeah, so that's kind of, I would say, yeah, I probably believed that there was something after, but I had no concept of what. I could not have or really articulated other than the mainstream answers you get, like, oh, you go to heaven when you die if you are saved. And, if you are not saved, then you go to hell for all eternity. That really was the extent of what I had been taught, in my upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah. So then obviously your grandmother passed away, and that's what you mean, like when you said everything you believed about reality then obviously kind of blew apart because of how she was communicating with you. And so I suppose before we dig into what you've kind of learned about what the afterlife is and how then we can kind of help us to live our life based around that, could you just kind of tell us a little bit about what happened with your grandmother? Like, how was she communicating with you? How did it kind of come about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, by the time my grandmother started communicating with me, I had already shifted into a more expansive view of reality. That very simplified view of the afterlife had already, dissipated, and I was resting in a more expansive, universal consciousness kind of way of processing things. But yeah, she tells me now that when she crossed, she was resisting. And so when we come to the end of our physical lives, the veil between the spiritual and the physical becomes thin. And it's why so many people on their deathbeds report to seeing loved ones who have already crossed, people who aren't physically in the room. And so at the time of our crossing, that veil that is already, whisper thin just opens up and we slip through, and it's usually an instantaneous phenomenon, and then it closes. And my grandmother, though she had an aversion to death, she did not want to die. And so she really fought to try to stay in the physical realm. And so in her crossing, her portal remained opened. And because she had this open portal, it allowed her to be able to manipulate the physical realm in ways that she would not be able to without a portal. And so that's kind of how she was able to do what a lot of people wonder, why aren't my loved ones communicating with me in that way? And it's not necessarily that they don't want to, it's that everything is energy, and it takes energy to manipulate the physical realm. And it takes a lot of energy if there's no portal. And it's very difficult. Like my grandmother at that portal in the house where she crossed, she's able to manipulate the physical realm. But if she comes to my house where there is no portal, she's not able to. It would take a lot more energy for her to be able to do that. I mean, So the very first communication, the TV, it's a Roku smart television. It popped on by itself. It navigated to the little search bar, and the word hello appeared in the search bar. And my family who live in the house ran out shrieking in fright. And I was actually shopping in Costco at the time, and they called me and they were just talking over one another, just frantic, just beside themselves. And they're like, the TV came on, and then the words, and I'm like, look, somebody's just playing a prank. Somebody's having fun with you for sure. And I was like, just go in, see if you can check the parameters, the cameras, the Ring doorbell, anything for any evidence that somebody is, manipulating the television. Make sure it's not hooked to any Bluetooth, Alexa, anything like that. Well, they investigated and they couldn't find a source for what had happened, but the TV had shut off. In their terror and their fright, the TV just shut off. And then a day or two later, it happened again. The TV pops on by itself, navigates to the search. And this time the word love appeared in the search bar, but they weren't having it. They ran out again. And so this persisted, and to the point where my aunt moved out of the house and went to live with her son because she was so frightened. And everyone who lived, there were 3 people who lived in the house at the time, and all 3 of them were beside themselves with terror. And so finally I went and I said, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this. It's affecting your quality of life, and in my heart of hearts, I really thought it's probably somebody in the physical realm, a hacker of some sort playing a prank. And so I sat down. Well, I went there to just see if it would happen while I was there. And it did. As soon as I walked into the living room, the television popped on by itself, navigated to the search, and my family, they were like, oh, it's happening. They were really nervous. And so I'm like, everybody just calm down. Let's sit down and see if we can get to the bottom of this. And so we began to communicate with whatever it was. And it became quickly apparent to me that it could not be anyone in the physical realm at all, because whoever it was able to read my mind and real thoughts and their minds also. I mean, I didn't realize at the time that she was reading their thoughts because I couldn't know what their thoughts were, but I knew my own thoughts, and I knew that whoever it was issuing responses before I could articulate a question. Something would be in my mind, and then boom, the response would just be issued in the search bar. And finally I said, are you reading my thoughts? And she said, yes. And so I started to just really test it. And and then she also knew things that were deeply personal that we had never shared with another soul, things that she would not have even known in physical life. So that's what convinced me that it was something spiritual. And at that point, it was like, okay, but is this Granny? Is it my grandmother, or is it something malevolent pretending to be my grandmother? And so really, it was just in communicating in time that we began to see that it really was her, because of her great love and devotion to particular family members. She spoke into some unhealthy patterns in people's lives in a way that brought a lot of healing. Someone was struggling with some mental health issues. She spoke into that in a way that saved her life. She apologized for some past hurts. So it was all just deeply healing and restorative. Everything about it just was wrapped in love. So that was what convinced me that it was indeed my grandmother.
I'm not surprised.
Wow. And a huge amount of energy that must have taken from your grandmother to do that, to actually type as well. I know they like to flick the telly on, don't they? And the light bulbs and things, but to actually type
I
as
know.
well. How
that
incredible
is
to get
amazing.
messages.
Yeah. And so, when you were saying that she helped you, different family members, was this all through the TV?
Yes, initially that was her mode of communication, the television. She would type words into the search bar. And, her first attempts, she really didn't have as much energy. And so that's why it was just hello and then just love. And when everyone was frightened, she just shut the television off because, she didn't want to frighten people, but she also couldn't say more. It was taking so much energy. But I guess she really stored her energy up, and put forth the effort to type more words to validate to us that it was her, because she really wanted to communicate so badly. There were some things that she could see from her vantage point, because when you cross, you get an expansion of awareness. You're able to see with clarity into the heart of people and situations. And so from her vantage point, she really wanted to speak into some things. So she really dug deep, I would say, and pushed through to say those things to us. Yeah.
That's incredible. I've never heard anything like quite so,
No.
in detail as that, like a type of
Yeah.
messages. You hear all the signs, like you were saying, you hear all the signs and the odd kind of message here and there, but that's incredible. I mean, when my mum passed over, she was very, very active, but it was never like that.
Yeah, she
that
did a lot of
detail.
stuff, but
Yeah.
to get those messages, how incredible. It's almost as if that was always her mission, wasn't it? To be able to pass these messages through to the physical. Like, it's incredible, isn't it?
And does she, so you said, she's still communicating with you now to this
Yes.
day?
Yeah. And she could use any electronic device. So in time she began to use the printer. It was just a printer that was hooked to a computer. So it was just a regular printer, but sheets of paper would come out because she would want to say more than you could say in the search bar. The search bar is only so long. And so she could like type a full on paragraph if she wanted on paper. And so she was blowing through a lot of ink. And so we invested in some thermal heat printers, which are really small receipt paper size printers. And they don't require ink because they're thermal heat, and you just recharge them. And when they're not hooked to any devices, we just, turn them on, and she can print more words on that if she wants to. Yeah. And I think, I've asked her, was it her mission? Were you destined to, was this destined to happen? Were you here to just do this, come back through? And she says no, that it was just a fortuitous accident, that it was actually a really painful crossing, but through it, such a beautiful door opened for her to be able to have this sustained communication with us. Yeah. And she's also content where she is. And so she stays and the portal remains opened. If she wanted to move on and kind of be further away, I mean, they're never away. Our spiritual family, they're always with us in some capacity, but for her to be able to communicate like that, it's like all of her energy needs to be directed at the portal. And so it'd be like 100% focused there. And she tells us that she's content, that she's able to continue in her inner work journey, and that she's not leaving. And so that's why it remains open and the communication is sustained.
Wow, incredible. So now I'm fascinated. You've got this kind of very detailed, direct communication across the veil. Like I get it now. So she was helping, you guys personally, your family and all of that. And so now has her message changed? You said she's taught you kind of about the afterlife. Is that what she's kind of working with you now to kind of explain to you what the afterlife is?
Well, she stayed because of her love and devotion to family members to speak into those things, and she continues to stay for those family members. The insights that she shares with me it's just a byproduct of that. And she didn't volunteer any answers. It's not as though she started to just give me insightful, metaphysical, mystical, theological information. I had to ask the questions, and I have to ask the right questions too. I have asked things, gotten an answer, and then in time, as my consciousness expands, think of a better way to frame it or a better way to ask it and get a deeper answer, a fuller answer, and be like, why didn't you just tell me that when I first asked? And she's like, but you didn't ask. So I have to ask the right questions. She's not here. She didn't stay to answer my nerdy questions, but thanks be to God, she puts up with them.
I get you. That's so funny. That's so cute, isn't it?
Is your relationship similar to how it was, in the physical realm, or is it very different?
It's very different. In the physical realm, we weren't close. So the people that she stayed to be with and to help and sort of, speak into those things, those are the people she was closest to. And I would say their relationship remains very similar. But more enhanced, deeper. She would say she's closer now than in the physical. She has said that to my aunt on many occasions. She's like, "But I'm here," because my aunt would say, "Well, I miss you," and she's like, "But I'm still here. I'm right here, closer than in life." But for myself, we really weren't close in the physical realm. But now I feel a deep connection and affection for my grandmother.
Oh.
That's amazing.
And with your connection to her, is it just simply based on how she communicates to you through the electronics, or do you feel like you can speak to her when you're out and about, or if you're meditating, or if you deliberately connect in?
Yeah, anytime. She hears me anytime if I speak to her. She feels me when I think of her. She tells me that spirits feel when you think of them, whether good or bad, whatever you're thinking, they feel it. And so if I were to just be having a thought about her, she would feel it. But if I were to speak words, then yeah, that's easier. It requires less energy on her part if I speak them aloud versus think them. She has to exert more energy to hear my thoughts.
Okay.
But yeah, she can hear me from home. I could call out to her at home. In fact, here's an example. I wasn't speaking to her, but I was having a really sad day because it was the anniversary of my dog Luke's crossing. And so I was at home just doing chores, but I was, in the forefront of my mind, I was thinking of him. And the phone rang, and it was my aunt who lives in that house where my grandmother's portal is. And she said, "Hey," she said, "I was watching Downton Abbey and Granny came on, interrupted, and said, 'Call Brandy.'" I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, what does Granny need?" And she said, "Luke sends his love. He is with you. He loves you." She knew I was having a sad day. She felt it. She knew that it was the anniversary. And so she reached out to give me words of comfort. Yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh, that's just
wow.
so special, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Isn't it?
I'm just so
And we've said before, haven't we, sometimes about, say, people in our own families that have crossed over, that actually they could probably do more help for you in the spirit realm than they could when they were here on earth.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a bit like your relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now she can do all this incredible stuff for you. And wow, it's so
Yeah.
powerful.
And
Isn't
I love it because obviously it's so wonderful that you get to have, kind of like that feedback from
it?
her. But I think again, and I'm sure this is your message, isn't it? It's like this is happening for everyone. You might
Yeah.
not have someone who has a portal and is able
Yeah.
to let you know, but they are still there and you can still talk to them. And I do think they can get messages to you in some way, but you might just have to be a bit more resourceful in noticing them because they'll come through different ways, not through, God, she's very clever, not through printers and TVs. But yeah, I think that's the point, isn't it? We all do actually have access to that. And I love the fact that speak it out loud to them because it just helps with the energy.
Yeah.
I quite like
Makes
that.
sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. She, Yeah, well, I'm sorry. She gives us signs and synchronicities, even not in the typed form. Of course, we have the typed message, so she probably doesn't exert her energy as much as someone else's loved one may who doesn't have that typed communication. But yeah, like red birds, people, say that, when they see a red bird, they think of their loved one. My grandmother tells us that she does send us red birds at key moments to let us know, like as a validation or whatever, that she's with us. And other loved ones are sending signs and synchronicities as well. So our loved ones are with us. And if we think of them often, talk to them, include them in our conscious waking lives, then they'll be a lot more active too. That also helps to kind of open up that communication for them to send you signs if they know that you're open to it, that you're acknowledging them and honoring them in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. So this is a really big question. But obviously, like you said, you've learned a lot of, and that's what your book is about, kind of what you've learned about the afterlife. What are the biggest things that you've learned about what the afterlife is like? And obviously then we can kind of go on to how that kind of affects how we live our life on a day-to-day basis. But I'm really, really curious to like what she's told you about the afterlife and your
Yeah.
main takeaways.
Yeah. So, well, I guess, when we think about what happens when we die, it's important to first, maybe define what does it mean to be alive? What is life? And, in the physical sense, really what life is a disassociation. So the way that I would articulate it, the way that my grandmother has communicated it to me, is that there is one consciousness of which we are all a part. God is all and all is God, is the way that she actually said it to me. And so from that one singular unified field of consciousness, we become fragmented off. We're like waves in the ocean. I'm sure you've heard people in spiritual circles talk about we're all just expressions of God, fractals of God, waves coming up out of the ocean. So that really is it. So it really is a sense of disassociation. When we incarnate, there is a constriction of awareness. So we become very zoomed in to the physical realm and cut off from the spiritual in a lot of ways. And so we're living in a dissociative state of existence, which that is, in psychology, the dissociative identity disorder, DID, it's actually a psychosis, right? And so that's kind of how we are living our lives. We don't see the full picture. We're blinded by this veil of physicality. And so when we cross, when we die, when we leave the physical realm, there is an expansion of awareness. And so the disassociation dissolves. That would be the best way to say it. And so you see with full clarity, you see into the heart of people and situations and circumstances. And so that's a beautiful thing, but it's also a very painful thing. I remember one time asking my grandmother, I was like, it must be amazing. I would ask her, questions about different theologians, different philosophers. And I'll be like, is their philosophy correct? Can you see in this book, is this book worth reading? Is it accurate? And she could just, she knows. She just can see into all of that. And I'm like, it must be fascinating to be able to see into the heart of everyone and everything like that. And she said, but painful. And so that really kind of brought it into sharper focus for me, because when you see with the full light of clarity, you see the good and the bad, and you have to be able to hold that with equanimity, which in the physical, we're not good at that, right? We shove those things into the shadow. We shove them down into the unconscious because we don't want to deal with them. There are things about our own selves we're not even consciously aware of. And so when we cross, all of that is brought into the light. And my grandmother tells me that there is a fire that we all pass through when we leave this physical realm. And it's the full light of clarity. It's the fire of God, if you will. And it's intended to burn away anything that interferes with love. So it's a refining fire. It's not retributive, it's restorative. But, if we've primarily lived our lives in service to others and, a more expansive way of being, we've let go of some of those ego things, live from love, essentially, then we'll have, easy time kind of going through that fire. But people who are clinging to that ego, people who are living in service to self, people who have done no shadow work, no inner work, they'll have a harder time in that fire. And so that she tells us it's much better to do your inner work now. She has really reiterated that. Do the work now, she says. So yeah, that's kind of what it's like when we initially cross. It's that expansion of awareness, that fire that you have to kind of navigate. And she, it's gradual. People go through it at their own pace. A free will doesn't cease to be, a thing on the other side. You still have freedom and you move through things at your own pace, in your own timing. But, after we're on the other side of that fire, then it's just really about integrating the lessons that we learned while we were here in the incarnated realm. So we come into this realm as for exponential learning opportunities, right? It's the suffering and the stress that allows us to grow. It's kind of like trees raised in a biodome. When they don't have the wind and the elements pushing against them, they grow really tall, really fast. But then they don't develop the stress wood, and so they're uprooted very easily. And so this incarnation allows us to become rooted because of the tension of opposites, because of that suffering. And so when we leave this physical realm, we have to kind of integrate the lessons that we learned while we were here, because we're working out that karma, which karma is just the unconscious conditioning that's running our lives. That's, it's the shadow elements that we have to bring into the light. So I said a lot there kind of, but that's really what it's about to cross. It's not, it's not at all the, go to heaven or hell. Like there are compartmental places that you could go when you die. Really, you carry that, whatever state of existence you are in when you cross, you take that with you. When you go, your state of consciousness goes right along with you. So if you're living in a state of hell or hellish, inwardly hellish type way of being, then you take that with you. And if you are living in an expansive, loving type way, then you take that with you.
Yeah. And you hear that so many times, don't you, in so many forms. And the fire that you were talking about, it kind of made me think about, when you hear people talking about the life review
That's what I
as
thought.
well.
Yeah.
It's the same concept, isn't it? With the life review, you have to kind of go through everything that happened in your life and feel how the other person felt, and it's like it's addressing all of the shadows, everything that you've done, and working through it. And again, it's not a punishment, it's not a judgment type thing, it's just part of your learning and your growing, and why, obviously, like you said, you came down to earth. So yeah, that makes total sense to me.
And I guess, is that why some spirits may get stuck on earth? Because as you said, Brandy, like, you still have free will. Can you choose not to walk through that fire? And that's when you get stuck.
Yeah, so she tells me that you can choose not to go through the fire, but if you do, you get in what she calls outer darkness, where you would not really have much energy at all. So you wouldn't be communicating with your loved ones, really. Not that you wouldn't feel them if they're thinking of you, not that you're not still with them, spiritually speaking, but you'd be just very diminished capacity in that state. So, if you resist the fire, it's just kind of really a really painful place to be. And I think that a lot of the hellish imagery in scripture is really rooted in that. That because it's even actually referred to as outer darkness I think in one of the passages. So, but she tells me that, of course it's better to just go on and let go and go through that fire and, and face the fiddle, so to speak. She tells me that she has gone through the fire, and it was like a month and a half after she crossed that she began communicating with us. And so probably in that time frame, she was kind of working all those things out. And that's why she's able to choose to kind of stay at her portal and communicate with us and things like that, and be content. If she had not gone through the fire, she would definitely not be content.
Yeah, and I can understand that. And so it's not a question, actually, just a thought popped in my mind when you were speaking. I don't know whether your grandmother said anything about this, but when she was going through that fire, when she was in that stage, that in between stage, did she say that there was anyone, like any spirit guides or any family members that were there helping her? Or was she on her own? Is this something she had to work through on her own?
Yeah, I think you do work through the fire on your own, so to speak, but you have family guides, other beings that are helping you along, and you can go through the fire and then stop for a bit and go through the fire, so it's not like you're in this fire and you have no control whatsoever. You sort of, navigate it at your own pace. And so some people will go through the fire a little bit and take a break, I guess, maybe try to integrate some of that stuff, sit with it, however you'd like to frame it, and then go again. And definitely loved ones. I know when my grandmother crossed, my aunt was waiting for her, and my aunt was telling her, come with me, come on, come with me. And my grandmother was stubborn, and she's like, nope, I'm not leaving. I'm not, so she stayed at the portal and tried to communicate from there. But she did go through that fire before she began communicating.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
So has your grandmother experienced any? Can she go with your aunt and then come back, or can you not go any further? Really?
Yeah, she could. And there's something she calls it the beyond, and it's highly stratified and complex. So when she says the beyond, she is speaking of like a multiverse kind of situation. And it really is. Sometimes when I ask questions, she'll say no say. And sometimes that means that she's not supposed to tell me, but sometimes it means that there are no words to convey what she would need to say for me to understand. So, and in that instance, that's kind of what it is, because we do live in a multiverse and it's highly stratified and complex. And so it's too difficult to explain. But yeah, she could move into the beyond and then come back. The reason that she doesn't is because of this portal. Like, she wouldn't leave that portal unattended. She would close it if she left into the beyond, because it would kind of be dangerous to just have this open door in your house into the spirit realm without someone there kind of guarding it, so to speak. That's kind of how, these more malevolently haunted places come to be. There's an open portal and anyone could come through, and so so she stays at the portal. Other loved ones are at the portal. I have talked to my grandfather, who crossed when I was 17, so she was able to facilitate that reconnection. It was pretty amazing. But yeah, if she were to leave and go into the beyond for a while, she would want to close that portal before she left, and she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to get rid of her doorway.
Because she's worried that she might not be able to open it again, or she knows that she wouldn't be able to. Right. Okay.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm like really curious. In the place that she's in now, because like you said, in the great beyond, there's like the kind of the multi-dimensional, reality, which, like you said, we can't even comprehend it, can we? So then, of course, there's no words, because our minds can't comprehend that. And I get that. But where she is now, is she kind of within our time? Is she within, say, like our dimension, so to speak? Is that kind of where she is? And what is that like?
Yeah, so no, she's on the astral plane, and I think she says it's the fifth dimension, and so she's not in the, of course, in our plane of existence, this 3D, world of form, physicality. But the portal allows her to kind of step through into it and manipulate the physical realm. So she's on a different plane, but she's here. Like, we are continually and perpetually surrounded by spirits. Most people don't know it. But, they're always, people can be just passing through your house along the way, and you wouldn't even know. And and that's the reality. It's like the physical and the spiritual realm are overlapping. And so she's here with us because she remains close to the physical plane. The astral plane is the closest to the physical plane. She's outside of time, although she does operate within our time because we operate within time. So she has to to communicate with us. And for things to make sense on our level, we use clocks, we use time frames or whatever. And so she is outside of time, but she would communicate with us. Like, she wouldn't wake us up at 3 a.m. to communicate.
Right.
She would be respectful that we are. Yes. Unless it was an emergency, I suppose. But yeah, so she's operating on our time, but she is definitely outside of time.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And has she said, because I know you said while she's here, she's obviously helping, her family and talking to you. And then she's doing her own kind of thing as well. What's she doing?
Well, she calls it work. And I'm like, work? I'm like, you mean we have to work on the other side? I'm like, I don't want to, cross and have to work. And she said, no, inner work. And so it's that integration. It's that shadow work. Yeah. And you just continue to integrate your lessons while you're on the other side. And I think it's just more difficult to do so without that tension of opposites. It can take longer. It can be more difficult, more arduous. But yeah, it's the same as here, but just probably just takes a little longer.
Right. And that's why we choose to come here, so we can
get things done.
Get it
accelerated learning. That's right.
Yeah. So we should be, and again, that's like going back to what you said, how like understanding the afterlife can help you in this life. You have to keep reminding yourself that, don't you? Like, I chose this, I chose it for growth. And let's just get learning. Let's just do it, because the more, like you said, the more you do right now, the less you're going to have to do over there. So what's there's so many questions. That's a really big kind of, you went into the whole fire and everything. Are there anything else that you've learned from your grandmother about the afterlife that really stands out to you, that's made kind of like an impact on you and how you live your life now?
Well, reincarnation was not a part of my worldview at the time. It wasn't that I was opposed to it. I just hadn't really given it much thought. I mean, coming from a Christian perspective, that's just not part of the worldview. And so I had heard the stories of past life, children who remember their past lives. I thought they were compelling, but I just kind of, set that aside and was living my life, not thinking about it. So probably that was the first thing she communicated that wasn't already a part of my worldview, that reincarnation is true. And so that really helps bring things into sharper focus, and you can live a more expansive way of being while you're here, because you realize that time is not running out. It really is a testament to the grace of God that you have unlimited opportunities to sort of cycle through and get things right. And so, the mainstream Christian view is just very nihilistic. It's like, oh, you get this short little life to check all the boxes, to get everything right. And then after that, it's either you go to heaven if you have checked all the boxes, and if you haven't, then it's hell for all eternity. And so that's just, really not a helpful view for living your best life, because it's very fear-based and it keeps you bound up in these cycles of, really, it's those shadow elements. They don't get integrated. You just build a bigger shadow because you're trying so hard to press into the light. So that was really helpful to learn that. And the fact that I know now that there is no such thing as a private thought, I mean, that really, I think about that a lot. There's no such thing as a private thought ever. And ultimately, we are all connected. So we are all one. And so that's something that you can know in your head, but living with that as your lived experience, I think that's the task of life, really, to look unflinchingly at yourself and to live as though you are one with all others, with God and others. And Jesus said as much, he said, love God, love others as yourself, not as, as in the way that you love yourself, but extensions of your very self, because there are no others. So that for me really is that there are no private thoughts. So that kind of brings everything on the daily into sharper focus. It helps me be a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, you can know. I think about this all the time. I kind of know in my head, and I believe that we are all one, and we are all fractals of God, the source, whatever you want to say. But there's this difference between knowing it and just like embodying it, isn't it? And it's such a challenge, because I'm like, how can I know that in my body? How can I embody that feeling? Because it's almost like I feel like once you get that, that's the key. Like then you've done it. It unlocks everything. It's like the master code, isn't it? When you realize that. And it's just not that easy.
No, it's not.
to feel that.
Yeah, because we're all so different, aren't we?
Yeah.
And some people are, can be so bad as well. Like, you might say evil and you think, how can we be connected? That's really difficult to try and get an understanding of that.
So do you think, like, saying that, like, do you think, Brandy, that with doing your Jungian stuff, coaching and understanding like the shadow, do you think that by looking at your shadow and working through your shadow, that is a really good way of getting to that understanding? Because I feel like that's the way that I feel like I'm going to get to it, by working through my shadows. Because when you work through that, you'll obviously understand that's reflecting back to everybody else, isn't it? And it's helping you remember who you are, because I feel like in my mind, I feel like it's those shadows that are kind of clouding the remembrance of that we are all one. So the more you peel away, the more you start remembering. What's your kind of views on that?
Yeah, 100%. That's it exactly. It's the shadow that creates the evil in the world, right? I mean, the shadow is not evil, but it's because we have pushed those things into the unconscious. We have uninvited them to the party that they lash out. So, and that really is why evil exists at all. It's not that there was, a fallen angel who became a devil who is perpetrating evil. That is us just projecting evil out onto another. In reality, it's all of the ways that we are fragmented within. And that's what the shadow work is about. It's about integration, right? It's about bringing all of that shadow material into the light and integrating it. It's not, not getting rid of, it's welcoming it back to the party so that it doesn't lash out and wreak havoc in our lives and those around us. So yeah, that's it. 100%. The shadow work is the way. That's the way, the only way forward. And when we think about it, also, you were saying like some people are really evil and you think they're so bad. How could I think that I'm one with them? But, the light behind our eyes is the same for everyone. It's that ego container that is perpetuating all of this evil and division. And so that's the mask that we wear in the world. Well, that doesn't ultimately exist. And so it really is, and it's difficult, but it really is. That's the juxtaposition, and that's the shift that we have to make. We have to sort of see through all of that ego nonsense, which is sometimes awful and offensive and what we would label bad. And we have to see that, no one is irredeemable. We are all expressions of God at our core. And our true self is ultimately what moves forward, ultimately we will all be reconciled ultimately, because our true self cannot be diminished. Everything is energy, right? And energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And so that is the part of you that continues on. And so, yeah, to see the light behind everyone's eyes, that's the task of life. It's very difficult to do, but that's where it's at.
And yeah, and totally agree with you. And I think sometimes it's harder to see the light behind our own eyes as well than someone else's, isn't it? And that's the job, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like seeing that in yourself, because I think once you see it in yourself, you'll automatically understand that that's in others as well. But that's really hard. I suppose that's the shadow work, isn't it, for yourself? We're in our own little prisons of not being able to remember who we are.
I think so. And I think also those shadow elements too, when we bring them into the light in our own selves, we begin to see our own darkness, right? We see ourselves clearly as we really are. In other words, like, we take the log out of our own eye so that we can see clearly that speck in our brother's eye. That's what it's about. Once you do your own shadow work and you integrate some of those things, you begin to see that we all are a mixed bag. We all have potential for great evil. We all have, those things that we would rather not present to the world. And so it allows us to have more grace for others. When we see people bound up in all of that egoic content and all of those shadow issues, we have grace for them. We have compassion. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We have more compassion because we can see that they really are in the grip of a complex and it's not who they really are.
Yeah, they've just forgotten. Like, I like to see, people who we would label as evil or bad. The way I try and see them is I just feel so sorry for them, because I think, oh my gosh, you're so far away from remembering who you are, from realizing who you are. And that's the compassion part, isn't it? That overwhelms me, rather than that, oh, you're just an evil person. And I do think that your consciousness has to get to a point of expansion where you can say that, because I know, 5 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have been able to say that, or I wouldn't have definitely understood it. I could have maybe said it, but not felt it. But now I truly I do truly, I can look at someone, and it's not about excusing. And I know this could trigger some people that aren't there yet, but I can look at someone that does evil, horrible things, and I still can see that they are that soul, that perfect soul, that light, however you want to say it, behind that mask of that shell of forgetfulness. And I just have compassion for them. I just need to start having the compassion for myself as well, like when I'm doing the shadow work. And that's a massive thing, isn't it? I think in the shadow work is this self-forgiveness and self-compassion and understanding, because we're so cruel to ourselves. We're so horrible to ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah, compassion really is key.
Yeah, truly.
So no, I was just going to say, like, when you were talking there, it's like that lack of control. When you were saying you see, you're more compassionate to them, but you can't control how they behave. And it's being able to let go of that, isn't it? That's really difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, we also need to not think that it's not that we sing Kumbaya with everyone, who is perpetuating evil either. And, it's not excusing it, but to see it for what it is, maybe have some healthy boundaries around certain people who are perpetuating evil, but we do so with compassion instead of with hard feelings.
Yeah.
So really, it really boils down to us, our own heart posture, right? Those other people out there, what they are doing is, that's their karma. And so we need not project onto them and perpetuate our own karma. So it's about just removing that projection and seeing ourselves and others with compassion and equanimity, and allowing things to be as they are for a time, but also not excusing evil and not sitting and really, to be the salt and the light is the hardest thing in the world, right? To step out in the world and be a light, to be authentically you. That is how we defeat evil, not by projecting onto others or labeling other people bad. It's by being a light that shines so bright that it affects those around us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah. We say that all the time, don't we? You've got to kind of bring it back to you, because when you focus on working on you and remembering who you are, you then affect, because we're all connected and we are all one, you will affect other people. I'm constantly saying thank you to all the people out there around the world that are doing their own inner work. So I'm like, you're helping me. I'm reaping the consequences of that as I am doing my work, and people will be reaping the consequences of that. And I just think that's the only way that I can get through seeing all the awful things that happen in the world, see the way the world is at the moment, understanding why the world is that's a whole other conversation. But nevertheless, all these difficult things that we're living with at the moment, that is how I get round it and move forward. Just focus back on me, remembering who I am, remembering my light, and knowing and trusting that is going to have repercussions for the whole collective. And if more people could understand that and just stay in their little bubbles and do their work, the world would be a better place, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you've learned about the afterlife, or how we can live our lives now because of that, what you've learned, that you would like to share with the audience that we haven't spoken about, anything that you really think is like super important for them to take from this conversation?
Well, I would just really say that death is just a doorway into an expansive journey of becoming whole. And so, really, the work is now, because there is only ever the now, right? We are inside of time. And like I said before, my grandmother is outside of time, timelessness. And so, the work is always to go within and do your shadow work now, because the kingdom of heaven is within you. So, and I think it's Jeff Foster who said, heaven is this moment, and hell is the burning desire for this moment to be different. And so it's about learning to live in the present moment and allowing things to be as they are without clinging and without resisting. And so when we do cross, we'll have an easier time of it. The mystics often say, if you die before you die, then you won't have to die when you die. And so that really is what it's about. It's about letting go of all of that egoic posturing and that mask, and to live as authentically you while you are here. Live from love. Love really is the answer to every question. I guess I could have summed everything up by just saying love is the answer to every question.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
awesome.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to say.
I could go.
I know.
If I ask another question
I
now,
know.
it's going to take us off on a whole other thing, isn't it?
I know. I have
But
so
there's
many.
much,
Yeah,
isn't
there is so
when you go,
much.
Brandy, we're going to be like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Yeah, I think that what I love about kind of your experience is that it's so tangible. It's so your grandmother has made it so tangible and so undeniable. And I'm sure that there could be people that would still try and find a way to be like skeptical about it, and it doesn't matter. It makes no difference, does it? But like for you and for people that are kind of, believe in that, it's just, I think, really super comforting, because even for me, like, I have absolutely no doubt that there is an afterlife. Consciousness continues. Our loved ones are all around us at all times. Even hearing that from you, I'm just like, oh yes, it just solidifies it.
Yeah.
And I love
can't hear
that.
it enough. Can you?
No.
All these stories.
And
I'd
honestly,
love
I
them.
wish, I'm so envious of you in the best way that you have access to this information.
I'm just like willing to see something these days. I'm not scared at all anymore. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant, but I also do, because I do past life, not to go, oh God, I'm gonna go on again.
That's what I mean.
But I do past life regression as well. And again, everything, it doesn't matter who I speak to and in what context they're coming from. Everything is the same. The message is the same. The things that I've learned from my past life regressions and the things that come through, it is all the same. And I find that really comforting. And also it just hammers home that message that you've been saying, which is do the work now, but don't stress. Because if you don't do it this time round, you do it next time round, all the time after that. And it's just a never ending journey, isn't it, of growth. And as soon as you can kind of get your head around, it's never going to end. So that can be scary sometimes. And you think, oh my God, why is this never going to end? Like, reframe that perspective and be like, oh, it's never going to end. And that's who we are. And it's part of our soul. And it's what we actually enjoy. Well, then you can kind of chill out a little bit, not take yourself so seriously, not take life so seriously. And that helps you do that kind of work, doesn't it? The shadow work, the deeper work, because it is hard. I'm not going to lie. The shadow work is tough, but it is worth it.
Yeah, if you have a bigger reason, like everything you've been talking about today, Brandy, then that's enough to make you do it, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like, make it easy for yourself on the other side. I want it to be as smooth a transition.
I'm running through that fire.
Yeah, because we are all in flux, and every moment is pregnant with potential. So really, when you see that, you live with your hands open a little more and realize that you just kind of take whatever arises in each moment, whatever arises within you yourself in every moment. That also is doing your shadow work, right? It's just living with mindfulness. And that really is the path into peace and equanimity and contentment. And so that's what we all want deep down, but we're trying to procure it through egoic attachments and clinging and striving. And so really, we say, oh, it's so hard. Really, it's the most simple thing in the world, but we make it difficult because of our clinging and trying to, obtain something, to add something when really we need to let go of something. I asked my grandmother this question in multiple ways. I rephrased it multiple times on different occasions. How does one go about obtaining salvation? How do you become enlightened? How do you, come into alignment inwardly? What's the path into integration? Individuation. How do we do? Like I said, I rephrased this question so many ways, and every time without fail, she said, let go, let go.
Yeah.
So, but we,
I feel like I needed to hear that right now in this moment.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, amazing. I'm not going to say anything else. I want to leave it there. Let go. Thank you, Brandy. Honestly, it's been an
so much.
absolute pleasure.
And I feel like I want to say thank you to your grandmother. I just feel
me
like
too.
she's here.
Yeah, she's here. Yeah. Thank you
I
so much
know.
for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here, both of you guys. So much insight you both share. Thank you for what you're doing. The work you're doing is really helping so many people. And my grandmother is always glad, always gracious, and happy to help and to offer insights.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's wonderful. She's wonderful. Thank
Beautiful.
you. Thank you so much. Right. Where can everybody find you, Brandy?
My website is andersonalchemy.com, and my handle across all of the socials is Brandy the Mystic. And my book is available Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife on Amazon.
Amazing. I am going to get that book and read that. That's next on my list. Absolutely. And thank you so much. We'll also put all your details in the show notes as well, so you can find Brandy's details down there. But yeah, until next time, guys, Brandy, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brandy's grandmother. And we will see you guys next week.
Take care.
Bye.